Hello and welcome to the next edition of the HP Discover podcast series. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, your host and moderator for this ongoing discussion on IT innovation and how it's making an impact on people's lives. Our next DevOps innovation case study explores how telecommunications giant Sprint has placed an emphasis on orchestration and automation to bring IT culture and infrastructure into readiness for cloud and software-defined data center as well as DevOps. We'll learn how Sprint has made IT infrastructure orchestration and automation a pillar of its strategic IT architecture future. And so let's find out how they're going to do that by welcoming our guest, Chris Saunderson, Program Manager and Lead Architect for Data Center Automation at Sprint in Kansas City, Missouri. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Dana. Very glad to be here.
You know, I'm intrigued by your emphasis on working towards IT infrastructure, getting to more automation as a principle, not just tactical, but a strategic level. Tell us why you think automation and orchestration are in fact strategic.
Right. So, I mean, we've been doing automation really since 2011, but it came out of an appreciation that the velocity of change inside the data center was just going to increase over time. We look at it as a journey that says, we have to go to the dark old days pre-2009 for us, or really pre-2006 for us, where the conversation was all around standardizing. I'm going to have standard systems, and I'm going to deploy them this way, and they're going to be racked this way. And we looked at that and we said, it's not really got a lot of legs to it. So you went to the virtualization revolution in 2003-ish, and we've been doing VMware since 2003, getting into more virtualization technologies on the other platforms that we have. But in 2009, my boss and I sort of sit down and said, look, this is going nowhere. We're not going to make it. We're not going to make a significant enough impact on the way that the IT division works, let alone Sprint as a whole, if we just keep doing the same things. So that's when we sat down and we looked at, what does the landscape look like? We could see the orchestrated data center coming, and I encapsulate it as the data center of things. I mean, when you look at the journey that most people go through, you see that VMware sprawl right around 2009-ish. Well, that's just the data center of things. You start to lose track of where things are and what they are and who uses them and how long they've been there and what is their state. So when we looked at automation and really orchestration in 2009, it was very solidly focused on IT operational efficiency. But, and this is where you're leading me to and why I'm happy to have this discussion is, it had the longer term view to it that it was going to be foundational for the way that we do things going forward, because simply, if for nothing else, to handle the data center of things. But really, we could also see changes coming in the way that our IT organization was going to have to respond to the change in our business, let alone just the technology change.
So that orchestration has allowed you to then not only solve the problems of the day, but put a foundation in place for the new problems, rapid change, cloud, mobile, all these things that are happening. Tell us, before we go back to the foundational aspects, tell us a little bit about Sprint itself and why your business is changing. And for those people that aren't familiar, what is the Sprint of today all about?
Well, the Sprint of today, I mean, we're the number 3 with aspirations to be bigger, better, and faster, and the provider of choice in wireless voice and data. We're a tier 1 network service provider, a global IP network, along with private network, MPLS backbone, all that kind of stuff. TRS, telecommunication relay services for the deaf, leader in that area. The Sprint of old is turning into the Sprint of new, where we look at mobile and we say mobile is it. Mobile is everything. That Internet of Things, that's what we want to foster. And I'm talking really what my CEO would talk about. My view on it is, I see an exciting company that's growing in terms of connecting people, not only to each other, but to their partners, really people who supply services to them, to their entertainment, to their business. That's what we're there.
So in order for your IT organization to be responsive to this fast-changing corporation, you had to take some steps. So let's go back to that notion of orchestration. When you start that journey for automation, getting out of those manual processes, managing complexity, but repeatably, getting the humans out of the way, so to speak, what have you learned that you might relay to other people? What were some of the first things that people should keep in mind as they embark on this?
So it's really a two-parter, right? Orchestration comes after automation because orchestration is there to consume those automation services, right? So let's take that one for a second. The big things to remember are change is hard for people, not technology change. I mean, people are very good about doing technology change, but unwiring people's brains, that is a problem. And you have to acknowledge that up front, that you're going to have a significant amount of resistance from people to changing the way that they're used to doing things. Now, addressing that is also a human problem, right? But in a certain sense, the technology helps because you're able to say things like, let's just look at the result and let's compare what it takes to get to the result versus the humans doing it, and what does it take to get to the result with the machines doing it. Let's just call it what it is. It's machines doing things. If the result is the same, then does it require the humans? That's challenge number one, unwiring people's brains. The second is making sure that you are articulating the relevance of what you're doing. So we had an inbuilt advantage, at least in the automation space, of having some external forces that were driving us to do this. And it's really regulatory compliance, right? Sarbanes-Oxley is what it is. PCI is what it is. You know, SAS-70, FISMA, those things. And recognizing the excessive amount of labor that we were expending to try and keep up with regulatory change. I mean, PCI changes every year, 18 months. Going just simply structurally just going through every rule set and saying, yes, this is, you know, I'm either, it doesn't apply to me, I'm more restrictive, all that kind of, that's 6 people. Well, we're able to turn that. We were able to address the requirement to continue to do compliance, and I'll get to the continuous part of this in a second, continuous compliance, to do compliance more effectively and more efficiently, right? So don't lose those upward communication, you know, the relevancy thing, which is not only are we doing this more efficiently, but we're better at it. The last thing would be that, just gone blank on the third thing. That's, I mean, if you really want me to hang 2 hats, it is really on unwiring people's brains, or rewiring them, really, and then making it relevant as you go upwards. Now, when you get to orchestration, now you're really talking about some interesting stuff, because this is where you start to talk about being able to do, in our case, continuous compliance, for example, that says, okay, we used to treat this activity as once a quarter, or maybe once a month, right? Now just do it all the time, but don't even have a human involved in it, right? What I want, and anybody who's talked to me about this will hear this over and over again. I want smart people working on smart things. I do not want smart people working on dumb things. And truth be told, 99% of the things that IT people do are dumb things. Now, the problem with them is they're dumb because it forces a human to look at the thing and make a decision. So orchestration allows you to take that one level up and say, go look at the thing and figure out how to make that decision without a human having to make it. And then tie that to your policy and then report on policy compliance, and you're done. The moment you do that, you're freeing people up to go have the harder discussions. This is where we start to talk about DevOps, and this is where we start to talk about some of the bigger, you know, rocks that sort of grind against each other in the IT world.
So continuous is very interesting. You use the PCI compliance issue, but it's also very important when it comes to applications, software development, test, and deploy. Is there anything that you can explain for us about the orchestration and automation that lends itself back to that continuous delivery of applications? People might not put the two together, but I'm pretty sure there's a connection here.
There is. I wish we had one. And so this is sort of, so when, you know, don't put me on the soapbox because I will, but DevOps is a philosophy. There was a fantastic discussion here from Adobe where it was very clear that DevOps is a philosophy. It's an organizational discussion. It's not necessarily a technology discussion. The thing that I would say, though, is you can apply continuous everywhere. The successes that we're having down in that orchestration layer, it's a much easier discussion to go in and say, you know how we do this over here? Well, what if it was a release candidate code? The real trick there, you go back to the things that I want people to think about, is DevOps is the philosophy because it requires development and operations to work together, not one hand off to the other and not one superior to the other. It's together. If they're not willing to walk down the same path together, then you have an organizational problem, but you may also have a toolset problem as well. We are an application lifecycle manager shop. I mean, we have it there. Does it cover all of our applications? No. Are we getting all of the value out of it that we could? No, but that's because we're spending time getting ready to do things like connect ALM into the running environment. But the bigger problem, absolutely, Dana, is the organization has to be ready for it, because your philosophical changes are way more difficult than technical changes. Because continuous means everything else has to be continuous along with it. So if you're in the ITIL model, you're still going to need CIs. Okay, how do CIs translate to Docker containers? Do they need to be described in the same way? If the operations team is not necessarily as involved in the management of continuously deployed applications, well, who do I route a ticket to and how do they fix it? This is where I look at it and I go, you know what, this is the opportunity for orchestration to sort of sit underneath that and say, I have not only the capability to enable people to deploy continuously, whether it's into test or production or any other environment, as it were, disaster recovery, pick an environment, but also to equip them to be able to operate. Continuous operation is sort of the thing that's coming after the continuous integration and development and deployment. That's got to sort of be welded onto the side of that, because you're going to enforce dyssynergy if you don't address it at the same time as you do with integration and deployment.
Let's look at some other values that you can derive from better orchestration and automation. And I'm thinking about managing complexity, managing scale, but also more of the software-defined variety. So we're seeing a lot of software-defined storage, software-defined networking, ultimately software-defined data center, all of which is abstracted and managed. So how do you find the path to software-defined data center vis-a-vis better orchestration and automation?
Orchestration is going to have to be at the core of that. And if you look at the product offerings just across the space, right, you're starting to see orchestration pop up in every last one of them. So simply because there's no other way to do it. I mean, RESTful APIs are nice, but it's not enough, because you're asking, at that point, customers to really start bolting things together themselves, as opposed to saying, you know what, I'm going to give you a nice orchestrated interface where I've got a predefined set of options, really actions that are going to take, that are going to be executed when you call that orchestration to make it work, and then apply that across the gamut. Software-defined storage is sort of the thing that's sort of coming after software-defined networks, and by no means, don't anybody misunderstand me. We are not even at the point of deploying software-defined networks, but we look at it and we go, you know what? I got to have that. I got to have that. If for no other reason than I need to remove the human hands out of the delivery chain for things that touch the network. And I go back to the data center thing. The moment that you go to 10 gig, where you're using virtual context, just anything that's in the current lexicon of new networking, as opposed to VLANs versus all that stuff, switch ports, you're losing visibility. You're absolutely losing visibility. And so without orchestration, and really behind that, without the analytics to look at what's happening in the orchestration that's touching the elements in your data center, you're going to be blind. And that is, now we're starting to talk about going back to the dark ages. I think we're smarter than that. And I think by looking at orchestration as sort of the enabler for all of that, is you start to get better capability to deliver that visibility that you're after, as well as the efficiency. I mean, we should never lose sight of the fact that the whole reason to do this is to say, deploy the thing. Well, that's fine, but how do I run it? How do I assure it? How do I find it? Because eventually, and this sort of keeps coming up over and over, eventually you're going to have to do something to that thing, whether it's deployed again, whether you have some kind of security event that is attached to it, or the business just decide, I'm not going to do that anymore. Well, now I have to find it and then do something to it.
Given your deep knowledge and understanding of orchestration and automation, what would you like to see done better for the tools that are provided to you to do this? Is there a top 3 list of things you'd like to see that would help you extend the value of your orchestration and automation to things like software defined, to things like DevOps as a philosophy, ultimately to have more of a data-driven IT strategic operation?
Right. I'm not sure I have a top 3. I mean, I can certainly talk in the general principle stuff, right? Which is, I want open. That's what I really want. Just to take a sidelight for a second, it's fascinating. It's just absolutely fascinating that IT operations is starting to become a software development shop now, right? But I'm not resistant to that in the least, because just in this conversation, we've been talking RESTful APIs and we've been talking orchestration, all that. None of this is IT operations-y stuff. This isn't, electrons flowing through copper anymore. It's business process translated into a set of actions. Open, interoperable, and then just give me rich data about those things. Very rich data, because we're getting to that point just by the sheer evolution of big data that it doesn't matter anymore. Just give it all to me and then we'll filter it out to what I'm looking for.
I think it's interesting with HP that they do have a big data capability as well as all that operations capability, and they're starting to put it together.
Well, in the same way that orchestration is starting to pop up everywhere, right? So if you look at their product portfolio, you look at network automation, it's going to have an operations orchestration interface into it. Server automation is sort of welded at the hip with operations orchestration. And it's going to appear everywhere else. Big data is coming with it. So, as much as I am not hesitant on it, just that it introduces complexity for me, the fact that the reporting engines are starting to turn big data is good. I'm happy for that. It's just got to get more, right? It's not enough to just be giving me, job results that are easy to find and easy to search. It's like, now I want to get some really rich metadata out of things. And I might need to, software-defined networks are a good example. The whole open flow activity just by itself looks like network management until it goes into a big data-y thing, and then it's suddenly like, oh, wait a minute. Now I've got a data source that I can start correlating events to that turn into actions inside the controller that turns into change on the network. Okay, let's extend that concept. Let's put that into orchestration. Let's put that into service management. Let's put that into automation. Give me that. And it doesn't have to be the single platform. Give me a way to sort of meta that, which, again, is in HP's product roadmap. The challenge for HP is deliver it. Deliver it.
Very good. Now, before we sign off, one of the important things about IT investment is getting the buy-in and support from your superiors or the other aspects of your enterprise. Are there some tangible metrics of success, returns on investment, improvements in productivity that you can point to from your orchestration, not just helping smart people do smart things, but benefiting the business at large?
Right. So organizations only do well things the boss checks, right? But the challenge for anybody who's trying to do this type of thing is making it something that they can connect to, right? The obvious ones for us are straight around our business case. I'm not really at liberty to talk about it, but that was fairly simple, right? That's labor efficiency, software platform displacement, right? Because you're able to displace one thing with many things with one, and that's a benefit to you. If you want to talk at real tangibles, our virtual server provisioning, even though it's a heavyweight process that it is today, is turning from days into hours. I mean, that's serious change. That's serious organizational cultural change. It's not enough. It's got to be minutes, not hours, right? And then compliance. I mean, that's a real, I keep coming back to it as just as a foundational thing that, we're able to continue to pass SOX, PCI every time. But we do it efficiently. It's not like, and that's a cultural change as well. But that's something that CIOs and above do care about because it's kind of important. One gets your CFO in trouble, the other one stops you taking payments. That gets people's attention really quickly. The moment that you can delve into those and demonstrate that not only are you meeting those requirements, the regulatory requirements, and you're able to report on them and have auditors look at and say, yes, we agree you are doing all those things that you should be doing. Then you can flip that into the next area, which is, we do have to go look at our applications for compliance. Okay, well, guys, we've got rich metadata over here that's able to articulate things, so let's apply it there.
Great. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. We've been learning about how Sprint has made IT infrastructure orchestration and automation a pillar of its strategic IT architecture and future. And we've heard how Sprint has gained through its emphasis on orchestration and automation by bringing an IT culture that is about readiness and compliance and speed. So please join me in thanking our guest, Chris Sanderson, Program Manager and Lead Architect for Data Center Automation at Sprint in Kansas City, Missouri. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dana.
And a big thank you to our audience as well for joining us for this DevOps and orchestration and automation case study discussion. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, your host for this ongoing series of HP-sponsored discussions. Thanks again for listening, and come back next time.